Thank you for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. In Season 2 of Hacks and Hobbies, we're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life who want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around. In this episode, I get to speak with Jonathan Stark. Jonathan Stark wrote an amazing book about hourly billing is nuts. And he's got an amazing mailing list called Ditching Hourly and a podcast on Ditching Hourly as well. And I absolutely love what he's talking about. I felt that same pain living in a world where you're masked as an hourly employee rather than using your mind to do the job that you're brought in to do. You're counted as, using your hands. And that's ever since it has stuck with me. So Jonathan, thanks so much for taking the time and coming out to the podcast.
Hey, my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to spread the message.
Yes, absolutely. So one thing that I am extremely passionate about and we talk about on the podcast is we look for the journeys and the stories and how my guests and how I am getting to the point where I want to go, like what's the journey? So how did you come to this realization that, this hourly rate or, this whole thing is just a charade or, how did you come to that point and what's your story?
Sure. Yeah. Sort of a group hallucination.
Yeah.
Well, there were a number of factors that contributed to it. And then there was one particular event that really was an epiphany for me, really turned on the light bulb. And what happened was I was working internally as a software developer at a big corporation.
Mm-hmm.
I became dissatisfied there and went to work at a solo firm, like a dev shop.
Yeah.
And I was just a junior developer, worked my way up over the course of years and ended up being the VP of this small firm, which meant that I was in charge of, I did less billable work. I did still billable work, but less billable work.
Mm-hmm.
We all billed by the hour. We all billed out at the same rate. And when I sort of moved into management, it was my responsibility to estimate new projects, create hourly estimates. I even built systems to track hours. I would chase the developers to get their hours in every week. I would make sure that invoices were going out with our timesheets and all the hours. And then I would, argue with clients over how long stuff was supposed to take and hours.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the context. I was aware of that, but never once did I question the concept of billing by the hour as a software developer or a dev shop or anything. It's just the way everybody does it.
Mm-hmm.
Never occurred to me that you would not do it. It was just the big question, if you were going to go solo, really was like, well, what should my rate be?
Mm-hmm.
So with that as the context, I became less and less satisfied with the experience of hours. So I loved everybody I worked with. It was a great company, but I was not enjoying the fact that all I really did was think about hours.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, it occurred to me that our best developer, we were probably losing money on because he got paid the most amount of money and he worked so quickly and so efficiently and so sort of cleanly or well, like the work that he was putting out didn't need to be debugged or fixed later. He just build stuff right really fast the first time.
Yeah.
So he was making us little or no money when it comes right down to it.
Yeah.
And we had a junior developer who was really almost more of an intern that had a really nice personality, really great guy, kept his clients super happy, but he took forever to do stuff. It was always broken. Then he would come and fix it, but he kept everybody happy. Mm-hmm. And he got paid like half of what our best developer did.
Yeah.
But, but he was making way more money on these. It sort of offended my sensibilities, and you can sort of imagine why. I felt like, geez, wouldn't we want to have amazing developers? Wouldn't I be happy? Wouldn't I try and go out and hire amazing developers? But then if I do, we're going to be making less money. So why would I bother? Why not just hire a bunch of really nice people who are terrible at development, have really slow machines,
Yeah.
don't really know fast ways to do things, and write bad code that needs to be fixed a lot. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
It just didn't make sense. And so here's the crazy thing about it for me was it took me probably a solid 2 weeks to even of like thinking about this all the time. Like, how is this possible? This can't be possible. For 2 weeks, it never occurred to me that the problem was hourly billing. But as
Hmm.
soon as I thought that, because I kept thinking, man, if we could bill out if we could just bill out our best developer like for a fixed price and just get like, whatever, $50,000 for this project,
Hmm.
then all of a sudden everything falls into place. If
Yeah.
I'm the one doing the estimates. If instead of doing an estimate, you said, well, this project's going to be $50,000, immediately I would want it to give it to our best developer instead
Hmm.
of this intern, because poof, he could blast through this thing in 2 days versus 2 months.
Hmm.
All of a sudden we get $10,000 a day for this person's contribution. Now all of a sudden I was like, oh, well, it's like I feel like when I lay it out like that, it's obvious that that's what you should do.
Yeah.
And the tricky thing for people is, well, but I'm afraid I'll get killed. I'm afraid I'll set the price too low, and
Yeah.
it won't take 2 days. It'll take 2 years,
Hmm.
and I'll basically be a indentured servant to this client until the end of time.
Yeah. That's wow. That's really crazy.
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, I'm not a developer, but I do design work.
Hmm.
And yeah, it makes sense. Like, because half the time I'm done with my work and now I'm either doing other things, but then again, right, as a consulting firm, like, well, you're not doing anything. Why are we paying you? But I'm done with my work. So that's really interesting. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It creates a whole new set of problems,
Mm-hmm.
but the beauty of it is there's many positive aspects to it.
Oh yeah.
But my favorite, and the thing that really drove me, was that it makes it a lot easier to make really happy clients. You
Yeah.
can really partner with the clients. You can really deliver customer satisfaction, because now it's everybody's financial interests are aligned in the same way. So like if I finish faster, say it's a software project or a design project, maybe you're going to do like a rebrand, or you're going to redesign a logo, or whatever it is. You're going to
Yeah.
redo a website,
Yeah.
whatever the thing is. There's no case where the client wants it to take longer. I've never
Exactly.
come across a case where the client was like, I wish you could take longer on this. Even if it was the same price, even if they were paying $10,000 for a rebrand, whatever, a logo redesign. Let's say they're going to give you $10,000 for a logo redesign, and you're like, well, I can give that to you in 1 day, or I can give it to you in 2 years. Which
Yeah.
would you rather have?
Like
Even if it
everybody.
was the same price, they're going to pick 1 day.
Yeah, they can pick one day. They're like,
Mhm.
as soon as possible, right?
Yeah, as soon
ASAP.
as possible. They want it yesterday. If you could,
Yes.
I built a magic wand that pumps out beautiful, effective logos.
Mhm.
They're exactly what you need. It took me 30 years to build this magic wand, but
Mhm.
now I can just pop a logo out,
Yeah.
boom, just like that. That's going to blow your minds.
Yeah.
And if you could do that, what would it be worth? Well, it'd be worth more than if it took you 6 months to do that logo.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
should get paid more for. It's
Exactly.
like FedEx. It's more for overnight service, not less.
Mhm. That's true. Because now you're paying for convenience more than anything else.
Yeah, and in a business case, in a business to business context, which is, what most freelancers and consultants and dev shops, they're, and agencies, it's all B2B.
Mhm.
Um, there's opportunity cost. Like the client does not want a project to take forever. Even
Yeah.
if it doesn't cost them more money, it costs them in all of the resources that they have to, their employees are devoted to their piece of the project. They're providing assets, or you're interviewing them, or you're asking them about business logic.
Yeah.
You want that over with. Those people have other jobs to do. They don't want to be bugged
Exactly.
by some outside, party asking them for assets, or asking them for business information or
Mhm.
business logic, or logins to systems. It's like, it'd be much cheaper in terms of overall resource allocation to have any project happen fast.
Yeah.
You know?
No, absolutely right. Get it done fast, get it done accurately. So there's no bugs,
Mm-hmm.
then the client will come back like, hey, you're done with that project. Let's do another one
Mm-hmm.
because we trust you and
Right.
it's worth our money, even if we have to pay more money because we're saving time because time is something they're not getting back.
Non-renewable resource.
Yep. Unrenewable. Yep. Very cool. So I've been listening to the Business of Authority podcast as well. And there's a lot of cool topics that are helping me align what I'm doing with my stuff and what I want to be, in the next few years. And it's been great help. So like, how did you make that connection, or how did you meet with
Rochelle.
Rochelle? Yeah. And create that collaboration.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a sort of little serendipity involved, but I think it's the kind of thing where opportunity comes knocking when you sort of increase your luck surface area by doing certain things
Mm-hmm.
and increase the odds of serendipity. So that the podcast you're talking about, the Business of Authority, I co-host with Rochelle Moulton,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a branding expert. She helps sort of people like authorities, like people who have written books and professors, doctors, that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
sort of build a personal brand, create a business around it, and kind of fund their mission to increase their impact. And she's been doing it for a long time. She's very experienced in the space. She has like hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers.
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly how I came across her. Someone probably shared a link to one of her articles with me because she's very much of the same mind. She grew up in a big consulting firm, and she gets consulting. She understands all that. She understands the importance of positioning and branding and all of those things they're things I talk about because you have to do those things to value price well. To deliver more value and be able to increase your prices, you need to be good at those things because
Yeah.
you need to be differentiated from the crab bucket of
Mm-hmm.
freelancers out there. So somehow she's an active blogger, and she's got tons of blog posts that I just totally agree with. But it's funny because she's like a branding person. I was at the time a software developer. It seems like two very different things. But she had sort of stumbled across all the same ideas, but from a different angle, so that it made them fresh to me. And I just really liked her writing. So I started tweeting her stuff out on a regular basis. I would follow her blog and tweet her stuff out. And so she's that caught her notice. She pays attention to like retweets and that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
mentions. And she started to kind of research me a little bit. And she was like, who is this dude? And so now, credit to her, she was like, we should just jump on a phone call and
Yeah.
like get to know each other a little bit.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was already planning to create a podcast, and I already knew what I wanted to call it. I can't remember, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I think I already had the name,
Mm-hmm.
or at least an idea for the name. And I definitely had an idea for what the show was going to be about.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I definitely know I want to start a new podcast that's about this specific thing. So basically going from consultant to authority.
Mm-hmm.
So taking that next leap up. So I see, this is a long answer to your question, but I see these sort of stages of soloist where you sort of start out as a freelancer and you do freelancer type things. You get certain accomplishments that freelancers do.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people will move into sort of graduate to a level of consulting where they act more like a consultant. It's not exactly the same thing. It's not the same thing almost at all. There are lots of changes that you make because you're operating in an advisory way instead of a sort of labor sort of way. And the next level up from that, the kind of advanced, the kind of black belt level, is authority. And there you get people like Seth Godin, Dan Pink, and people like that who become authority / author. That's where the word, the same word, where they're primarily an author, teacher, sort of missionary around a big idea or a mission or something like that. And then they're building a business around that. And you can think of a million of those, but it's like, how do you get there? So the whole podcast was around exploring the activities that would help you transition from being a consultant into being an authority, and then creating a business around it.
Yeah.
So all of that was, I was going to do that. Like I was already planning on doing that.
Yeah.
And then we had this phone call, and I was like, oh man, I was nervous too. It was like asking someone to go on a date. I was like, we got off the phone. We totally hit it off on the phone call.
Yeah.
Just really jamming. And then we got off the phone call, and I was like, I wonder if she want to co-host this with me, because I
Mhm.
have a solo podcast called Ditching Hourly, and it's actually
Yeah.
hard to do a solo
Oh my
podcast.
God, it's so hard.
Yeah, it's hard. So I was like, this would be really fun to have a co-host to make the whole thing way easier.
Hmm.
And I already know I love the way she thinks. Her whole thing is great. So I asked her, and she jumped at it. She said, "Yeah, absolutely, let's do it." And she'd never done a podcast before. She was really
Nice.
interested in learning how that worked. She's fairly technical, but not super technical.
Hmm.
So there were it's a lot of moving parts to a podcast.
Oh
It's not
yeah,
all how to do it.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's how that came together.
That's really cool, man. It's those. So I don't know what to say, but because I've had similar experiences when I'm talking to someone, I'm like, hey, what if we did a podcast about this topic? And other people I'm talking to, like we're thinking of creating two different podcasts, and it's like you're just on the same frequency when you're talking to these people. When you meet somebody who's talking about the same thing that you're talking about, but from a different angle, it's like, wow, I found my twin,
Yeah.
almost kind of, right? So,
Right. Yeah, it's great. And it's wild because I over the years I kind of keep coming across them. There's not tons,
mm-hmm,
but I do slowly come across people who have come up from a different it's almost, if you picture like a mountain,
mm-hmm,
and all these people are sort of encircling the base of the
yeah,
mountain, and they can't see each other. They're too far away, but they're all climbing up to the same peak. And
yes,
as we get closer to sort of the top of the mountain, you start to see these other people, and they have
yeah,
a completely different experience of the journey, but they're all going to the same place.
mm-hmm,
And Blair Enns was like that for me. Chris Doe, Rochelle Moulton, Rochelle from Business of Authority, and
yeah,
the different ones I've kind of encountered over the years. David A. Fields is another one,
mm-hmm,
and we all have very different backgrounds, but we're all in a similar place on the same similar place, all going to the same destination, and
yeah.
it's wild when that happens. It makes me feel like there's actually there's probably something there.
No, absolutely. Because so I got introduced to Gary Vaynerchuk a few years ago, and I was kind of reading his book, and then I like left it busy with work and whatnot. But then I came back to it and I listened to the whole thing through, and I heard about Crushing It. And Crushing It is, they're talking about like all these people that are doing the similar thing, just like you mentioned, we're all going up to the same mountain. But
Mm-hmm.
then as you come towards the top, you start noticing other people that are
Mm-hmm.
getting to the same point. And there's a lot of stories like that in Crushing It. And I was like, wow, these people, they just kept on doing and kept on doing it, and just being consistent and just creating content, creating value for their audience, and building their audience. And it's like, wow, there's something there absolutely that I need to dig more into and see if I can follow that same path and go up there.
Mm-hmm.
It's really exciting to see how all these things are coming together. And so my passion for podcasting started like 8 years ago. And I even started a podcast called Still Brewing It, because my cousins and I, we just talk about different ideas. But like you said, it's not easy. There's a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all in different states. They were in California, I was in Colorado. And it was just really hard to bring all those things together. But now, and you mentioned, right, it's really hard to do a podcast on your own, like a solo podcast. Who's going to come listen to you?
Mm-hmm.
Unless I mean, you've already had a book out, so there's those followers coming in through. And so earlier last year, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do a podcast about hacks and hobbies, because my friends would make fun of me, or colleagues of like, hey, so what's your new hobby this week? I'm like, all right. So I was just getting into beekeeping, took a beekeeping class, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to start documenting this process, and let's see what happens. So one of my buddies, he's like, you should talk about queen bee. I'm like, sure, queen bee, right? Queen bee's, she lays eggs, and I'm like, no, Beyonce. I'm like, how's Beyonce queen bee? So that's my first episode on the podcast, talking about Beyonce, where I have very limited knowledge of her. So that was fun. So I did that for like at least 6 months. I just did a solo podcast and I'm talking about all the different things that I'm doing and all the things that bees are doing and getting to, beehives. And then I was like, you know what? There's so many connections. There's so many people that are circling them out and doing the same journey. Let me find out their story. Maybe I can improve and get better at doing what I'm trying to do. So that's where the interview series started. And I've talked to like 50 people so far, and it's just it's like this is the space I want to be in. Like why didn't I start talking to people on radio like 10 years ago? It's so
Right.
amazing.
Yeah, you can like sense it.
Hmm. So tell me, what are some of the things that you like as a podcaster? How long you've been podcasting, and what are some of the things that you do to like bring in more audience? Because that's something that every new podcaster is like, how do I get more listeners?
Right.
How do I get more downloads?
Right. That's I don't know how long I've been podcasting for. I counted sort of recently, and I've been on or published like 500 or 600 episodes.
Wow.
I started when I was still in tech doing a podcast called Niche with a co-host.
Hmm.
And that's still, I think those episodes are still live at niche, nitch.cc.
Nice.
And I think those go back, that's at least 5 years, to 2013, maybe something like that.
Hmm.
And that was really just like a friend of mine and I geeking out about technology on a weekly basis.
Oh man, it's my
And
favorite thing to do.
yeah, it was super fun. And it was one of those podcasts that it was very much inspired by the Headspace podcast. I'm blanking on the name now, Boag World. And those guys just kind of hang out, and it felt like you're having coffee with friends and just sort of listen to it while I was sitting in the coffee shop working with not by myself, but with a
Yeah.
room full of strangers.
Yeah.
And it felt felt kind of social or something.
Hmm.
And that it was just that style of podcast. And then from there, we sort of rebranded it as Future Tech, and we started doing Terrifying Robot Dog, which is basically the same thing, but we focused on more like the way that technology is changing the way we interact with the world. So things like VR and blockchain and stuff that's a little bit more current, instead of just like, oh, how did Rails blow up in your face today?
Sure.
That kind of thing. So and we still do that. We've I don't know, done a couple hundred episodes of that.
Nice.
Ditching Hourly, I think I have about 70 episodes.
Mhm.
Business of Authority, we just recorded the 71st episode.
Nice.
So, and I've guested on 100 podcasts at least.
Yeah.
So, but your question was, what about building audience? And
Mhm.
here's the thing, like, there are all sorts of like tips and tricks and tactics that I've heard about over the years that supposedly will not magically, but supposedly if you put them all together,
Mhm.
will increase the number of listeners to the show. Like, make sure you say subscribe, or make sure at the end you
Mhm.
ask people to rate it on iTunes, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not going to say that stuff doesn't work,
Mhm.
but it's not going to help you as much as focusing on delivering amazing content in the
Absolutely.
show itself
Yeah.
and making it really easy to share. But like, by definition, podcasts are pretty easy to share.
Mhm.
So my mailing list and I have like a daily mailing list for, about pricing for independent professionals
Mhm.
and podcasts. I really don't think about growth hacks at all,
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
And whenever in the past, I've done it from time to time, didn't do anything,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, it always boils down to the same thing: make a better show.
Make a
Just
better show.
make a
Exactly.
better show.
Yeah.
And people will like automatically, like, if you make an amazing show, or let's put it like this: if you listen to an amazing episode, what are you
Yeah.
going to do with it?
Tell somebody else.
You're going to tell somebody else. So
Yeah.
just make an amazing show,
Mm.
and people are going to share it. I don't, the stuff that I do is so niche. I mean, like, pricing, everybody's pricing everything, but like, all day long, you're dealing with prices.
Yeah.
But I'm not focused on anything like pricing a lamp or a can of
Yeah.
soda. I'm not like that kind of a pricing consultant.
Right.
I'm like, for service providers, especially independent service providers who currently bill by the hour, how can we ditch hourly? How can we disconnect our time from money to actually leverage our expertise into profit and growth? And, it's very, I'm never going to end up on like the Tonight Show or Joe
Sure.
Rogan.
Mhm.
It's like, it's
Mhm.
just not mass market enough. No one,
Right.
there's not like a massive appeal. So I'm never going to have a big audience,
Yeah.
but I can have a huge audience. I'm not going to have like a million subscribers. That's
Sure.
ridiculous. But I could certainly have 10,000 or
Mhm.
even 100,000. I could see that. So I just concentrate on knowing who my audience, knowing who I, yes, Seth Godin would say, who I seek to serve.
Mhm.
Like, okay, who do I seek to serve? Independent professionals who are billing by the hour and just like working so hard they can't get ahead.
Yeah.
Like, okay, those are my people. And how do I help them? I just concentrate every time trying to give them actionable, specific, tactical advice mixed in with big picture strategic advice to grow their business without hiring a bunch of junior employees and trying to like increase their hourly rate once a year by 10%.
That's really good. That's really good. I love that. Yeah, I'm a huge student of Seth Godin's, and he's been coming on a lot of podcasts lately, podcasts and
Yeah.
interviews.
He just released
Promoting
a
this
book.
is
So
marketing. Yeah, and it's really interesting to see. Like, he's almost always saying the same thing, but like he'll delve into some of the stories, and like it's like very refreshing to hear him.
mhm.
And recently, I discovered my friend Fuad. He's on the DYFC,
Mhm.
and he was telling me that
I
actually he
know.
talked to Nate, or he got an email through Nathan Barry, who's saying, "Well, if you have 100 episodes recorded, Seth Godin might agree to come on the podcast." So I was like, okay, maybe I get to talk to him one day.
Mhm.
So it's been inspiring, very inspiring, because like he's been a freelancer for such a long time, or an entrepreneur, and I'm like, okay, I want to get there. So I'm working on a lot of different things and hopefully getting there faster than slower. So got to keep consistency and constantly posting new content, not just new, but valuable content, like you mentioned, make a
Mhm.
really good show. And that reminded me of an episode I heard yesterday. It's on Pop Psych 101. This is a podcast about mental health in pop culture,
Hmm.
like how they use mental health in movies, TV shows, and books. And this one specific episode was about the movie Inside Out,
Uh-huh.
and talking about childhood depression.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, it's wild. Like the internet enables it sort of empowers the wrong word, but it sort of like benefits the long tail people.
yes.
The Seth Godin idea, and Gary Vee talks about this too, and Clay Shirky. It's
Mm,
like it's so hard to conceive. Like there's something like 4 billion people
mhm,
online. So
mhm.
there's like 7 billion people on Earth, and something like, let's just say more than half of them are
Yeah.
connected to the internet.
Yeah.
That's mind-boggling.
That
If
is
you
my
have right, you can't even like you could blog about bees, I'm sure,
hmm
and if you were genuine and cared and got into it, like you could make a nice living just selling stuff to
Yeah.
people who are into bees. Like my wife's super huge into knitting. She teaches knitting classes,
hmm
and she'll sit there knitting.
hmm
And like we don't have TV. We haven't had TV in the longest time. We just sit there and watch, like she just sits there and knits and watch like YouTube.
hmm
They call them podcasts. They're really YouTube channels of
Yeah.
knitters just talking to the camera, like, "Oh, this is what I'm working on to do."
hmm
And these people, they either dye yarn or they put together kits or they write PDF patterns, and they sell stuff in Shopify stores or through Ravelry, which is the social network for knitters.
hmm
And you know, they're like people who have huge, like I shouldn't say huge, like not huge like Amazon, but
hmm
they have really successful businesses
Yeah.
based on just like talking into a terrible webcam, like
That's true.
like live streaming to YouTube while they're knitting something, like poor lighting and bad sound. and then they like spin up a Shopify store or sell a pattern on Ravelry and, make $750,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's amazing. Like right now
Mhm.
is such a great time for people who care about something or
Yeah.
really passionate about something, because the internet enables you to like find the others, as they say. It's
Yes,
like
it does.
but there's so much, obviously the flip side is there's so much noise that you need to be laser focused
Laser focus. Yep.
to break through, to create some kind of critical mass. I
Yeah.
I talk about all the time. I use the analogy of like if you put a little bit of like tinder or kindling or something like that on the ground, like small pieces of paper and bark and thin strips of bark and wood and
Mhm.
twigs, you could leave that in the sun all day long and it's never going to catch on fire.
Yeah.
It's not going to catch on fire. But if you take a magnifying glass and you focus the
Oh.
called the attention of the sun, you
Mhm.
can start that. You're never going to start a big log.
Yeah.
And the wood represents people. So if you
Mhm.
have like this little pile of twigs, you could start that on fire with a magnifying glass. So you
Yeah.
just create this tight focus on this small group of people, this tiny bit of fuel,
Mhm.
and then boom, catches on fire. Starts to become a little bit self-sustaining, but whoa, you're running out of, you need more fuel. Put more fuel in there, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. Now you've got this, you start to get like a nice fire going. You don't
Wow.
have to use the magnifying glass anymore.
Anymore? No.
Yeah, you can sort of like get a little less focused,
Yeah.
but continue to serve this audience, because now you've got this audience, and it's like, oh, now I don't have to constantly be rubbing sticks together and using this
No.
magnifying glass.
That's
I can just like make this, like this community is going. It's like
Mhm.
self-sustaining. It's going to burn out if you don't keep feeding it, but you can
Right.
get more fuel and keep putting it in there. And it's just amazing. It's a little bit scary to imagine like what would happen if email or decentralized, or RSS
Yeah.
decentralized, or just being able to like anybody can put up a website.
Yeah.
It's a little bit scary to imagine that going away, because
It is. Yeah.
it would be not, I'm not saying it would go away, but a lot of people doom and gloom talk about
Mhm.
censorship and net neutrality and sort of balkanization of the internet
Yeah.
and chopping it up and regulating it. It's like very scary, because right now is like the most amazing opportunity.
That's true. But I love that analogy. I'd never thought it that way. Like, that was an amazing analogy. I could definitely share it with my friends. I'm like, dude, you just gotta light a fire. You
Yep.
just
Start
gotta
a little
light a
fire.
spark. Just gotta have the spark. The one example I would mention, like in this niche market, like there's a YouTube channel called Ants Canada. And
Yeah.
I remember watching them like 2 years or maybe 6 months ago. They had 670,000 subscribers.
It's about ants.
Just about ants
Yeah.
in ant farms indoors, and this guy's talking about ants, and they've got multiple colonies. And I checked on it recently, last month. I think it was like 2.7 million subscribers.
Yeah. It's unreal.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
So
It's great.
wow,
It's great.
it's
So
it's the perfect.
yeah, when I talk to people, when I talk to like a new student, because I do private coaching with
Mhm.
people, and there's an application form, because it's not a good fit for everybody. In fact, it's not a good fit for almost anybody.
Yeah.
But when people are ready, I can tell, because in the application form,
Mhm.
one of the questions is, uh, what are your passions outside of work? Mostly I work with software developers.
Yeah.
So if they say in there, if they say, oh, I just love coding, I'm like,
Mhm.
person's probably not ready. Like I'll have a phone call with them and kind of drill into it. But if they just love coding, they're not ready for what I'm going to do with them,
Mhm.
because they need, I mean, unless they're going to sell to other coders, that's a separate thing.
Sure.
But like usually what they're doing with me is like trying to sell to bigger clients, because
Mhm.
bigger clients stand to benefit more from your expertise, and therefore you can set your prices higher and build
Yeah.
more profits into your business. Anyway, the point is, like, I get on the phone with people, and one of the things I like to do is find some sort of, I want to make that little pile of tinder. I want to make
Mhm.
that little pile of kindling. And that's the first group, the early adopters, like the
Yeah.
the core of the audience. Like, who are those people? And they're like, I don't know, I could do this for anybody. I'm like, I know you can do it for anybody.
Yeah.
Who do you want to help? Like, you're going to spend all of this time of your, adult life, spending all these working hours helping somebody. And they're
Mhm.
like, I don't know, I could help anybody. I'm like, oh, well, would you help a serial killer? No, I wouldn't help. Well, would you help whatever? And you can list off all these people who they wouldn't help. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, like, so you can list these people who you don't want to help, but who do you want to help?
Yeah.
And if they can't come up with an answer to that question, it makes it so hard
Yeah.
to start out. So like, like this YouTube channel you mentioned, Ants Canada, those are your ant people.
Mhm.
Anybody into ants? Yep.
Mhm.
And it makes it really easy
Yeah.
to like, the word passion is thrown around a lot, and
Mhm.
it's got some bad connotations. But if you are, let's just say, really excited about something, like something that you're going to be researching anyway, like
Yeah.
a hobby, let's say, wouldn't it be
Mhm.
cool if you could do your hobby like full time or as much as you wanted, and then
Exactly.
figure out a way to fund that? It's not like I don't think of it like, let's go out and do sales and always be closing and get money from them and money from that person and get money from that guy. It's not like
Mhm.
that at
It's
all.
not like that. Mhm.
No, it's like, you've got this mission you want to further, like, like, the bees are disappearing. What are we going to do about this? I'm scared about this. I want to research. I
Yeah.
want to figure out what to do. And why are these colonies collapsing? Is
Yeah.
it cell phone? Is it 5G? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
And like, let's just say you were super excited about studying that or finding out more about that.
Mhm.
What if you could figure a way to fund that in a way that would attract more people to the cause, increase awareness of the issue, do all the things, and then
Yeah.
kind of self-sustain? That's what's so great right now with, I mean, YouTube's not,
Mhm.
it's not platform independent, so to speak, but it's pretty free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's, I was listening to a TED talk. I'm not going to be able to remember the guy's name, but he's
Sure.
kind of like the mushroom guy.
Mhm.
And he genuinely, clearly believes that mushrooms are like the solution to a vast majority of human problems, big problems.
Wow. Interesting.
And he believes that they're sentient. I mean, like, the guy is like so into it. And but he's like I don't know if he's a doctor or not, but he's super
Sure.
scientific,
Mhm.
and he makes credible arguments. And this guy's super into mushrooms. He's just really into mushrooms, and he sells like mushroom supplements, and maybe they do something, maybe they don't. But it gives people who love this guy, because he's a
Yeah.
total character,
Mhm.
gives people who love this guy a way to fund him.
Mhm.
And like, I bought like mushroom pills off this guy. Just,
Mhm.
I don't think they do anything. I don't know. Maybe they do,
Yeah.
but who cares? I want to give this guy $40. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? So, I when I hear somebody like, there's sort of a trend going around maybe a year or two ago, and maybe it's still going on. I just don't hear it anymore. But
Mhm.
sort of like famous YouTubers who have to work at like a sandwich shop during the day to like,
Yes.
I'm like, come on. If you can't figure out how to take 10 million people,
Mhm.
make a living off of that,
Yeah.
you're not focusing on the right things.
Yeah.
Like my kids, there's like, I've got little kids, and
Mhm.
they're really into like Minecraft videos and
Yeah.
like that. And there are plenty of ways besides, advertising on YouTube, that you could make a very comfortable living,
Yeah.
like, just recording happy birthday messages for kids. Like, I would pay $500 for Dan TDM to say happy birthday to my daughter,
Yeah.
no question.
Mhm.
Like, you're just not, if you've got a huge audience like that and you can't figure out how to make a
Monetize
living
it.
from it so you can keep doing it, you're just
Yeah.
not thinking very hard.
Wow. No, that's so true. And the more I look into it, the more people I find that are doing the same thing that they're passionate about, that they're excited about, and they've made it a living. I mean, you'll see there's a lot of coaches.
Hmm.
There's a
Yeah.
there's a huge amount of coaches that I've seen and I'm connecting to, and they're speakers, and it's like a whole new world has opened in front of me, and I'm like, wow, where was this all my life, right? It's been pretty eye-opening and exciting at the same time. And wow. Cool, man. This was a really mind-opening call. I loved it.
Awesome.
So at this point of the conversation, we'll just have a few questions.
Hmm.
What is one hobby that you wish you got into?
I never learned how to swim,
Me
which
neither.
I don't know if or no way. I don't know if you would call that a hobby, but it has definitely been annoying my
Mhm.
entire life. That's definitely one. But I've spent most of my life pursuing my hobbies.
Yeah.
So I haven't had, I did music for a long, long time,
Mhm.
Dungeons and Dragons, martial arts.
Nice.
Yeah, I've actually spent a lot of time pursuing hobbies because my dad, credit to him, always said,
Mhm.
do what you love and the money will follow. And
Yeah.
that's certainly been true for me.
Nice.
But yeah, learning how to swim would have been nice.
Very cool. Next question. What is your favorite movie or TV show? And if none, how about a book?
Oh, wow. People have asked me this question before, so I know my answer to the movie question is Caddyshack because I've thought
Okay.
about it a lot. If I was trapped on a desert island with one movie, it would be Caddyshack,
Caddyshack. All
which
right.
is kind of embarrassing because it's a silly movie, but it really stands the test of time and it makes me laugh every single time.
Nice. I'll have to check it out.
Oh,
Maybe I've already seen it. I can't remember.
yeah, it's 70s era comedy. It makes no sense. It's totally senseless, but it just makes me laugh every time. But I mean, so many books, so many. It's hard to pick one. I'm a huge fan of the Harry Potter series. We read it.
Mhm.
The kids love it. There's a million. I could go all day, but if I had to pick a movie, it'd be Caddyshack.
Nice. Well, you've got a really good cast in it with Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, Cindy Morgan, and Rodney Dangerfield. I mean, you can't go
Yeah,
wrong.
Ted Knight. It's a riot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
If I was
mm,
going to say a TV show, if people haven't checked out The Expanse, if you're into sci-fi, The Expanse
mhm.
books and TV show are all fantastic.
It is. It's been an experience in itself. I've been watching The Expanse as well, and it's been pretty exciting. Just like, oh, what's next?
Hmm.
How'd they do that? Okay. What is your favorite superhero?
Oh man, favorite superhero. When I was a kid, would have been Spider-Man,
Okay.
mostly because I like Batman never did it for me. I'm like, that's just a
Mhm.
dude. That's superpowers. That's just a guy with a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And Superman is just too over the top goody two shoes for me. So Spider
Mhm.
Man was just dark enough, and he could do. I mean, the idea of swinging around a city and like,
Yeah.
I just love that. So I guess I'd have to say Spider Man.
Nice. Nice. See, I've gotten that answer different ways. Like some people like, oh, I like Batman because he's just a guy and anybody can be Batman with enough money. I'm like, okay, sure. So yeah, very good answer.
Thanks.
Okay, if you were a board game, what would it be?
Oof, a board game. Risk.
Risk. Nice. That's a risky game. You sure you don't
It's
take
a.
that?
Yeah, I mean, I think about like a lot of freelancers and billing by the hour. Not to pull it back to that, but
That's fine.
the reason that people are most reluctant to give up the security blanket of hourly billing is that it increases the amount of risk they have to take on. And I like to point out to people
Yeah.
that risk is risk is where profits come from, risk
Mhm.
reward. Like if you don't take risks, you are going to have razor thin margins. And that's the experience of most people after a few years of billing by the hour. They're like, why am I working harder and it feels like I'm making less money?
Yeah.
So
Wow.
Risk is the one that popped to mind. Plus, I played Risk a lot. It was a fun
Yeah.
game.
Awesome. That was good. That was really good. Okay, so where can my audience find you? And
Yeah, best place to go would be valuepricingbootcamp.com. You mentioned it
okay.
earlier.
Hmm.
That is a short daily mailing list sequence
Hmm.
that kind of talks about the core principles of value pricing and compares it to hourly billing if that's something that you do.
Hmm.
And you can reply to those emails. They go straight to my inbox, and you can
Nice.
start a conversation with me in that way.
Fantastic. Well, Jonathan, it's been really awesome talking with you. And this was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Janae.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode on Hacks and Hobbies. We absolutely appreciate your contribution. You can find additional notes on hacksandhobbies.com. Please share the podcast with your friends and tell them what you learned about our guest today.